Rwandan-backed rebels appear keen to show they can not only seize the biggest city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, but also govern it. That's a stark contrast to the last time M23 took Goma, back in 2012. Then they withdrew a few days later. But this time, how well the rebels can maintain order and run services in a city of 2 million people could be key to determining if their offensive expands or is doomed to failure. At a press conference, Corneille Nangaa, head of the Congo River Alliance that includes M23, said they had found Goma to be a wounded city, traumatized and fearful.
We are here in Goma to stay as Congolese and to protect the population against threats. We will continue the march of liberation all the way to Kinshasa.
The former president of Congo's election commission pledged to get children back in school within 48 hours and to open a humanitarian corridor so displaced people could return home. Since Goma's capture, power and mobile data services, which had been down for days, have also returned. The border with Rwanda, a lifeline for the city, has reopened. And M23 officials said they had trained up hundreds of administrators who were ready to deploy. However, the World Food Programme has expressed concern over the lack of aid access to Goma and surrounding displacement camps. It warned that people are running out of food, medical care and drinking water. On Thursday, these Goma residents were turning to Lake Kivu after fighting disrupted the city's water supplies. Bonchance Mapendo said he was praying this would be his last trip.
Because we, the people, are the ones they came to govern. And without water, we cannot live. They must do everything possible to restore our water supply.
What's at stake is a potential return to the situation that arose in the 1990s and 2000s. Back then, Rwanda, Uganda and their proxy forces occupied and ran Congo's mineral-rich eastern borderlands, managing trade, communications and transport. In the 3 years since M23 reignited its rebellion, having been dormant for a decade, it set up parallel administrations in areas it's conquered, UN experts said in June. That involved taxing civilians and businesses and rolling out intelligence networks. In December, UN experts said the insurgents had generated an income of $800,000 per month after taking control of Rubaya, the largest coltan mine in the country. But Goma, with its population size, international airport and role as a hub for one of the world's biggest humanitarian crises, remains a far greater challenge.
Congolese math teacher Mushagalusa Habamungu has made the drastic decision to leave his classroom and join the fight to defend his city of Bukavu from a rapidly advancing rebel army. Even teaching is impossible without peace, he said. Habamungu is one of hundreds responding to a call from former soldier and local MP Albert Kahasha to reinforce the Congolese armed forces against the M23 rebels.
Early this morning, I started packing my belongings. In fact, my cousin here was the one who shaved my head because I told him I needed to leave already prepared.
Earlier this week, M23 seized Goma, some 125 miles to the north. Allegedly backed by Rwandan troops, the rebels have faced little resistance in some areas north of Bukavu, prompting widespread fear among locals. Rwanda denies accusations from the United Nations and others that it has sent troops into Congo. Before leaving home, Habamungu said goodbye to his family, knowing his journey might be one way.
We have been suffering for a long time, suffering for so long because of the aggressors who are our neighbors and also because of international conspiracies. We are here to defend our homeland until death.
Upon returning to office, US President Donald Trump has launched numerous threats around tariffs. They range from the broad to those aimed at specific sectors or countries. Here's a roundup. A cornerstone of Trump's vision is a phased rollout of universal tariffs on all US imports. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been pushing for a modest 2.5% tariff rate that would climb each month, according to the Financial Times. But Trump has suggested tariffs could be even higher. Economists say Trump's policies will be inflationary as importing businesses who pay tariffs pass added costs to customers. Trump has threatened big tariffs on the United States' three largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico and China. For Canada and Mexico, he said he was considering 25% border taxes on imports from February the 1st. And he's floated the idea of heavier tariffs on some vehicles, potentially including EVs. He's also continued to threaten tariffs against China, citing these measures as retaliatory.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
In Trump's first term, the two countries engaged in a long trade war that hurt both economies.
The European Union is very, very bad to us.
Trump has also said the European Union and other countries have troubling trade surpluses with the US. He has said he will either subject those countries' products to tariffs or he will demand they buy more oil and gas from the US. And Trump has threatened that if a deal to end the war in Ukraine is not struck soon, he will hit Russia and other participating countries with taxes, tariffs and sanctions. Outside of Europe, he's called India a very big abuser on trade and vowed to use tariffs to correct trade imbalances. Trump has said he wants to impose tariffs on imported computer chips. He pointed to Taiwan, where the world's largest contract chip maker, TSMC, makes semiconductors for Nvidia, Apple and other US clients. Tariffs on pharmaceuticals, including medications, have been suggested, so too on aluminum and copper, metals needed to produce US military hardware, as well as steel. The aim is to entice more US production, though the move could raise costs for automakers.
From US President Donald Trump and tariffs to AI market volatility, these are the stories to watch in business and finance in the coming week. From bond investors and currency traders to Federal Reserve officials and foreign powers, all eyes will be on US President Donald Trump and tariffs. Duties on the United States' neighbors, Canada and Mexico, could disrupt nearly $1.6 trillion in annual trade. An arguably more interesting case is China. Trump recently commented that he didn't really want to use tariffs with China following a, quote, friendly phone call with leader Xi Jinping. The monthly U.S. jobs report due on February 7th comes as investors are assessing the prospects for further interest rate cuts and how the Trump administration could reshape the labor market. December's blowout jobs report raised doubts about whether the Fed would have room for more easing and sent Treasury yields shooting higher. While encouraging inflation data did calm markets, a hot January jobs report could change all that. The emergence of China's AI sensation DeepSeek has overturned assumptions about the computing power and investment needed to create state-of-the-art models. Earnings reports from Magnificent Seven members Alphabet on Tuesday and Amazon on Thursday will give investors the chance to determine if the recent volatility is a warning sign or a signal to reinvest. The Bank of England meets on Thursday to set interest rates. Growth flatlined in the third quarter of 2024, and the BOE expects the same in the last one. Markets aren't quite fully pricing in a quarter-point cut, but economists seem to think that's the likely outcome.
I was just with the president in the Oval Office, and I can confirm that tomorrow, the February 1st deadline that President Trump put into place at a statement several weeks ago continues. The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country.
A surge in violence against women in Kenya has spurred many to learn to fight back. At least 97 women across Kenya were killed in femicides between August and October of last year, according to police figures. Members of this class in the Korogocho neighbourhood of Nairobi refer to themselves as Kukuja Kinge, meaning Grandma Protect Yourself in Swahili. This is 81-year-old Beatrice Mungai.
They were capturing old women here in Korogocho. They raped them, killed them, and threw them in the river. Let us say God is great because we got a helper called Jake from America with his wife. When he heard this story, he told us to come together and that he would teach us how to defend ourselves. So we brought together many women, and he used to train us at the chief's office. He trained us for 6 months.
The course was started nearly 25 years ago by an American couple working with local residents after the rapes in Korogocho, which is poor and plagued by crime. Activists said the growing number of femicides is felt across Kenya's impoverished informal settlements. Inside a church, Mary Wainaina practices punches with other women. She used her self-defense skills to fend off a man who tried to rape her a few years ago.
He told me to lie down. I did not refuse. I lay down. He then knew I was ready and he started undressing. I was still lying down. When he attempted to rape me, I grabbed his private parts with all my strength and twisted it, and he started screaming. Those who were close heard the screams and asked what was going on, as they had seen me going in that direction. They asked why that man had followed me. I wasn't even the one screaming. When people came, they caught him as he was and started beating him up. And that's how I was saved.
Gender-based violence has long been a major problem because of patriarchal views, socio-economic inequalities, and insufficient legal protections, researchers say. Kenyan law does not criminalize spousal rape, which means it can only be punished under laws covering non-sexual assaults. Activists say Kenyan police routinely fail to respond to complaints. For now, the Kukuju Kinge say they can only count on themselves.
Investigators on Thursday recovered the so-called black boxes from the passenger plane that collided with a U.S. Army helicopter at a Washington airport a day earlier. A preliminary report about the incident is expected within 30 days. National Transportation Safety Board member Tom Inman said the military helicopter was also equipped, quote, with some form of recording devices, and those will be read either by DoD or by us, referring to the Department of Defense. He said the agencies have agreements to share data on those recorders. The crash, which killed 67 people and left no survivors, is the deadliest U.S. air disaster in more than 2 decades. The cause remains unclear. Radio communications showed that air traffic controllers alerted the helicopter about the approaching American Airlines jet and ordered it to change course. For aviation experts like Daniel Bubb, those details are difficult to square.
The air traffic controller apparently was talking to the helicopter pilot and said, maintain visual separation from the American Airlines jet. And apparently that pilot acknowledged those instructions. So that's why I think this is very perplexing. It's hard to know. You know, did the helicopter pilot get confused? Was there a medical episode?
Reuters asked Mike Ginter, another aviation expert, whether he thought the accident could have been avoided.
I can tell you that the airspace in and around Washington, D.C. is the most restricted, regulated, controlled, complex airspace in the country. Any aircraft flying in that area is under direct and specific control of air traffic control, including that helicopter and that airliner. So if it's, the answer is yes, it was probably preventable, and that's exactly what the NTSB will uncover in their investigation.
Names of all the victims have not been released, but they included promising young figure skaters and people from Kansas, where the flight originated. Senator Maria Cantwell said that the dead also included citizens from Russia, the Philippines, and Germany. Chinese state media reported 2 Chinese citizens had been killed in the crash. Weeks after the Eaton fire ripped through the city of Altadena, just outside of Los Angeles, crews have begun the daunting task of clearing hazardous materials left behind. On Thursday, workers with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, rummaged through the rubble of scorched plots, plucking out materials like batteries and paint and propane cans by hand.
Yes, it's certainly the biggest job I think we've encountered.
22-year EPA veteran and on-site coordinator Harry Allen says it's one of the most complex jobs the agency has ever seen.
We want to make it safe for people to come back and look through the remains of the fire without having to worry about explosion hazards and fire hazards or chemical injury.
The EPA is running the initial phase of cleanup before government or private contractors come in with heavy equipment to clear entire lots. In addition to making the environment safe for residents to return, this initial removal phase also ensures that hazardous materials, like lithium batteries, don't wind up in the municipal trash where they can catch fire. President Donald Trump issued an executive order last week directing the EPA to complete the removal of hazardous materials, quote, as soon as practical. The administration gave the agency a deadline of February 25th.
And then, the pressures here, people want to return to work, they want to return home, they want to come in and see what's left of their place and try to rebuild. And, making that happen quickly for Angelenos is really important to us.
Me as a Jamaican, for example, I love oxtail, but there's no way I'm going to a general supermarket getting oxtail seasoning. So with us, we focused on, just to summarize, halal meat, everything's halal. You don't need to overthink anything there. We do bulk buy-in, we do wholesale, exotic fish, we do ethnic hair and beauty, so you can even come and get hair extensions if you need, down to brushes and all of that stuff.
Getting this fish in your local, mate.
You can't Bangladesh.
You got free, get free.
It's a one-stop shop for everybody, so just been receiving a lot of messages like, finally, I don't have to go to multiple places. You lot are geniuses. Can't wait to get there. When is it open? I need to be there now. Is their loyalty card? So the response has been amazing.
As President Trump stated yesterday, he is still committed to placing tariffs on Canada starting as early as tomorrow, possibly. Now, we don't know precisely what that could look like, but I do know two things. First, if the president does choose to implement any tariffs against Canada, we're ready with a response. A purposeful, forceful, but reasonable, immediate response. We won't relent until tariffs are removed, and of course, everything is on the table. Part of what this council has been doing is pulling together perspectives from across industries, from across different parts of the country, to make sure that anything we do will be fair right across the country, that all Canadians will share in the job of standing up for our interests and, quite frankly, standing up to defend the most successful trading relationship in the world. Of course, I won't sugarcoat it. Our nation could be facing difficult times in the coming days and weeks.
And then I can take any questions you might have.
Since the ceasefire started on the 19th of January, so just over 10 days ago, UNRWA brought in 60% of all aid supplies that went into Gaza, and our teams continue to distribute. So it's not just about bringing in the trucks, it's also about the reach and the distribution of aid. We were able also to do that in northern Gaza, where, according to estimates, hundreds of thousands of people have gone back to. So that's one thing. And yes, if UNRWA's work is interrupted, if UNRWA is not allowed to continue to bring and distribute supplies, then the fate of this very fragile ceasefire is going to be in the risk and is going to be in jeopardy.
Congo's M23 rebels appear to have consolidated control over a devastated Goma. It is the second time the Rwandan-backed rebels have entered eastern Congo's largest city. But last time, in 2012, they soon withdrew and were defeated the following year. This time, things are different. For one thing, the offensive comes at a time when the world's attention is elsewhere. As one Western diplomat put it, quote, "The U.S. is looking inwards. Europe is divided. The Middle East is in turmoil. Kagame seized the moment." The 3-decade conflict in Congo's east is rooted in the long fallout from the Rwandan genocide and the struggle for control of Congo's mineral resources. Rwandan President Paul Kagame's government has long denied supporting M23, but that's despite findings to the contrary in numerous UN expert reports. Nevertheless, Kagame has been able to trade on his image as a stable partner in a tumultuous region. He has spent the last decade charming the nations that could hold him accountable for transgressions in Congo. He has ingratiated himself with Britain, for example, agreeing to accept asylum seekers in Rwanda. Though the UK government has scrapped the migration deal, it says it is keen to maintain close ties. Sources say France's President Emmanuel Macron is working behind the scenes to calm the situation, and has spoken with both Kagame and Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi. But Paris is also nurturing relations with Rwanda. It is keen to repair damage from its role during the Rwandan genocide, and to bolster its influence across the continent as its authority wanes in its former West African colonies. Kagame also deployed thousands of Rwandan troops to fight an Islamist insurgency in Mozambique that threatens a major French gas project. Meanwhile, analysts said Congo's neighbors are more reluctant to get involved militarily this time. Instead, African leaders are scrambling to launch diplomatic efforts to end the fighting. Across the Atlantic, Washington urged the UN Security Council to consider unspecified measures to halt the offensive. The Rwandan president said he had agreed on the need for a ceasefire in a phone call with the U.S., but gave no indication of bowing to demands for a withdrawal from Goma. Myanmar's ruling military has extended a state of emergency for another 6 months, state media reported on Friday. The announcement came a day ahead of the 4th anniversary of a coup, and as the country gears up to hold an election, widely seen as an effort by the ruling generals to gain legitimacy. Myanmar has been locked in a civil war triggered by a military takeover in 2021, which overthrew the elected civilian government of Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi after a decade of tentative democracy. The next election has no set date, but tensions are set to rise ahead of the anticipated ballot as many forces oppose the junta. Voting will only take place in about half the country, and dozens of opposition groups are banned. As both sides push to increase their control of territory, one analyst told Reuters, quote, "There is a very real danger these elections could turn into a bloodbath if revolutionary forces decide to attack polling stations, election officials, and party candidates." Opponents of the military government have urged other countries not to recognize the outcome, saying it will be held against the will of the people. A state-run outlet said extending the state of emergency was needed for, quote, "stability and peace," in order to hold what they call a, quote, "free and fair election." Critics have derided the election as a sham by the junta to keep themselves in power through proxies.
Dimitris Marinoglu's family have ploughed this land in northern Greece for generations. But now Marinoglu is worried their way of life is under threat. The Bulgarian water supplies that have kept his family's crops alive for decades could dry up this summer.
We have invested in this. We bought reels. We bought watering equipment. All of this is worth a lot of money. If there is no water, it will go to waste. The fields will go to waste.
Since 1964, water from Bulgaria's mountains has flowed freely along the Arda River into 50,000 acres, 20,000 hectares of the Evros Plain in northern Greece. Evros has no functioning dams or reservoirs and relies on the water delivered between May and September. The deal, which was a World War II reparations agreement, expired last year, and it is not clear if it will be renewed, as Bulgaria assesses its own water needs. Water has become a precious resource in southern Europe as climate change has made summers hotter and rain less frequent. Greece clocked its warmest winter and summer on record last year. Local farmers have been protesting, accusing the government of not acting fast enough to secure a deal ahead of the summer.
Because of climate change, we had droughts, we did not have rain, and we are forced to rely solely on the Arda River. If Bulgaria says it will not give us water, the fields will dry up.
Officials at the Greek Energy and Environment Ministry say political instability in Bulgaria and successive interim governments have stalled talks.
If there is not a long-term agreement, it will mean death for us in this region.
But the head of the local Farmers Association believes that not even a deal may be enough to save the region.
The infrastructure projects and the entire irrigation network here is based on the bilateral agreement. The problem is that for the last 60 years, nothing has been done. No infrastructure project and no maintenance.
More than 36 hours after a deadly stampede at India's Mahakumbh Mela festival claimed dozens of lives, distraught relatives frantically searched hospitals and mortuaries for missing loved ones. For Kaikeyi Devi, what was meant to be a spiritual journey turned into a nightmare as she watched her husband being trampled to death.
He died in the stampede. All the people just pushed him. We had climbed up after our bath. We were in the middle of men from two sides. He was dragged into the chaos and we started crying, "Let him free, let him be. Send him here, send him here. We're here, we're here." He never came.
Despite the bleak mood outside this hospital in Uttar Pradesh, some, like Manoj Kumar Sani, who was looking for his father, still held hope when Reuters spoke to waiting families.
I have been searching for him for the last 3 days. I went to the hospital as well, but didn't find him.
Witnesses described scenes of terror as thousands surged towards the confluence of three sacred rivers, the Gange, Yamuna and mythical Saraswati, for a so-called holy dip.
When the stampede occurred, everyone was shouting and crying for help, saying, save me," as they climbed onto each other, but nobody was helping or rescuing them.
Despite the tragedy, millions continued to flock to the northern Indian city of Prayagraj on Thursday for the world's largest religious gathering. Police have confirmed at least 30 deaths and 60 injuries, though some reports suggest a higher toll. A government inquiry has been launched into the incident, which occurred as more than 76 million people took part in one of the festival's busiest days.
President Donald Trump's nominee for FBI Director Kash Patel faced a fiery Senate confirmation hearing on Thursday. In an exchange with Democratic Senator Peter Welch, Patel would not say that Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
Can you say the words, Joe Biden won the 2020 election?
Joe Biden was the President of the United States.
You understand this. There's a difference. I can say the words, Donald Trump won. I don't like to say it, but I must say it. And you cannot say that Joe Biden won the election.
What I can say is the same for both of them, Senator. Both of their elections were certified, and they are both, one was and one now is president.
Patel has previously claimed, without evidence, that the FBI used undercover operatives to entrap rioters during the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. However, he appeared to break with Trump on his sweeping pardons for all of the nearly 1,600 people charged in the attack, including hundreds who were convicted of assaulting police.
And I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
When asked by Welch whether he would take legal action against Trump's opponent in the 2024 election, Kamala Harris, whom the president has called a criminal who should be prosecuted, Patel vowed to follow the Constitution.
There is no prosecution or that the FBI will ever initiate because the FBI will only do investigations, and those will only be open where there's a factual and constitutional basis to do so.
Democrats on their own will not be able to block Patel from being confirmed. Trump has so far succeeded in securing approval for one highly controversial nominee. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was confirmed last week in a 51-50 vote after Vice President J.D. Vance broke a tie caused by 3 Republican no votes.
Was President Donald Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to the January 6 defendants?
Thank you, Ranking Member. A couple of things on that. One, the power of the presidential pardon is just that, the president.
Well, I concede he has the authority. I'm asking, was he wrong to do it?
And as we discussed in our private meeting, Senator, I have always rejected any violence against law enforcement, and I have, including in that group, is specifically addressed any violence against law enforcement on January 6th, and I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
37-year-old Kazuki Nakata carefully tends to his plants in the small yard outside his home in Kawasaki, Japan. What started as a hobby during the COVID-19 pandemic has become a valuable source of fresh produce for his family as he grows his own vegetables. Cabbage prices in Japan made headlines this month in Tokyo, soaring to 1,000 yen, or nearly $6.50, around the average minimum hourly wage. The staple crop is one of many items driving up the cost of living in a country with stagnant wages. As the cost of living rises, Nakata's family feels the financial benefits of homegrown food more than ever.
I didn't start out with my family's finances in mind, but when I think of how much it helps with the household budget now that prices are going up, I'm glad I got into this hobby.
In 2023, Nakata left his job at an electronics store to focus on growing vegetables. He grows 47 types of vegetables, including lettuce, onions, and daikon radishes, in empty plastic bottles, drink cans, and even his bicycle basket. Nakata also created a YouTube channel where he posts videos about it. It gained around 4,500 new subscribers in the second half of January alone. With vegetable prices where they are, Nakata says the interest is understandable.
Whenever I upload a video, there are loads of positive comments saying things like, wow, or I want to try this too. But I also get comments like, this is really important now that vegetables are so expensive. So I get the feeling that everyone is becoming aware of the issue.
Recent government data show that while agriculture prices have risen, the average vegetable intake among Japanese adults reached an all-time low in November. The Nakata family, however, is going against the trend. They say they're eating more fresh vegetables than ever before.
I feel like the taste of vegetables you've grown from seeds is so many times better than normal. These vegetables are grown with love, so they're different.
It actually makes me really, really sad that this is what it's come to, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to be scared and I'm not going to allow them to win. We're going to live our lives and we're proud, we're Australian, we're Jewish, and there's nothing wrong with that. So we're going to continue to do what we do, and we're really grateful that the police are here and protecting us from these crazy people.
Well, unfortunately, the community has been subject to some shocking anti-Semitic and racist attacks, and I've been working with the local police, the area commander, to bolster the police patrols to make sure that the community here feels safe and that they get what every other Australian deserves, and that's the right to go about their lives peacefully without the threat around their community.
No, I don't. Well, I didn't say that. You said that. No. No, we may or may not. We're going to make that determination probably tonight on oil. Yeah, because they send us oil. We'll see. It depends on what the price is. If the oil is properly priced, if they treat us properly, which they don't, we'll be announcing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a number of reasons. Number one is the people that have poured into our country so horribly and so much. Number two are the drugs, fentanyl, and everything else that have come into the country. And number three are the massive subsidies that we're giving to Canada and to Mexico in the form of deficits. And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico. And we will really have to do that because we have very big deficits with those countries. Those tariffs may or may not rise with time.
Will oil be part of that, though? Because we get oil from Canada.
Oil is going to have nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned. Oil has nothing to do with it.
Because actually, it's easy to possible because you're then in a position to imagine how many things start building teams to do, how many things. There are challenges, of course. I mean, I've been the International Federation president for 10 years. That is a full-time task. I was then effectively buried in the delivery of a London Games, either winning or the actual 7-year delivery phase of it. So no, I haven't spent the last 15, 20 years, in the coffee houses or, on the social circuit. But look, I hope that what I've done indicates a competence and an appetite for driving the movement forward and building on what we have.
The important thing is to compete and give the best of you. And that is what I'm committed to do. And I'm doing it with all my energy, with all my capacity, and I'm pretty much satisfied how things are going. So I will be, regardless of the result, I will be very satisfied because the effort is done with a very good, small but very good team of people, and we are doing a great job. Now, who knows what the final result is? But I am certainly in a position of being a strong candidate and having real possibilities of winning.
I am somebody who likes to see things getting done. And I recognize that good leadership is working closely with people, doing things together. That is where 1 + 1 becomes 3.
Former U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, President Donald Trump's choice to be the Director of National Intelligence, faced harsh criticism of her past defense of former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden and comments seen as supportive of Russia at a confirmation hearing on Thursday. While in the House of Representatives, Gabbard introduced legislation that would have dropped charges against Snowden, a former government contractor who leaked thousands of National Security Agency documents and then fled to Russia. Senators on the panel, both Republicans and Democrats, pressed her to address if she believed he was a traitor. Here's Republican Senator James Lankford.
So was Edward Snowden a traitor?
Senator, my heart is with my commitment to our Constitution and our nation's security.
Ours too. Was he a traitor at the time when he took American secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
Here's Democratic Senator Michael Bennet.
So let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden-like leak.
Media, it's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation.
Gabbard is a former Democrat and combat veteran without deep intelligence experience. If confirmed, she would serve as the nation's top spy, overseeing all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. She has expressed views seen as echoing Russia's justification of its war against Ukraine, criticized U.S. involvement in Syria, and had a 2017 meeting with Moscow-backed former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. She tried to get in front of this in her opening statement.
Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States. Accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed.
Democratic Senator Mark Warner expressed his disapproval of some of Gabbard's comments and his opposition to her nomination.
You blame NATO for Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. You rejected the conclusion that Assad used chemical weapons in Syria.
Republican Senator Tom Cotton, the committee's chairman, told Fox News he backed Gabbard's nomination. Her hearing continued Thursday afternoon in a closed session to address classified information.
More than 60 people were feared dead on Thursday after an American Airlines jet collided with a U.S. Army helicopter over Washington, D.C.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation.
At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
District of Columbia Fire and Rescue Chief John Donnelly said the regional jetliner coming from Wichita, Kansas, fell into the freezing waters of the Potomac River near Reagan Washington National Airport. American Airlines confirmed 60 passengers and 4 crew members were aboard the jet. A U.S. official said the Black Hawk military helicopter was carrying 3 soldiers on a training flight.
Did you see that? X-472.
Air traffic control audio recorded an aircraft calling in, apparently referring to the crash just before 9 p.m. Wednesday night. Surveillance footage appears to show a sudden fireball over the sky. The mid-air collision occurred as the passenger jet was approaching to land at Reagan.
We can do 3-3 for Blue 6342.
Radio communications between the air traffic control tower and the Black Hawk showed the helicopter knew the plane was in the vicinity.
This was not unusual with military aircraft flying the river and aircraft landing at DCA.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said both the helicopter and the airplane had been flying standard flight patterns, and there had been no breakdown in communication.
What I've seen so far, do I think this was preventable? Absolutely.
Airspace is frequently crowded in the U.S. capital region, home to 3 commercial airports and several major military facilities. Passengers on the flight included ice skaters, family, and coaches returning from events in Wichita, including Russian-born former world champions Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov. Russian media said Shishkova and Naumov, who were married and working as coaches, were returning from Wichita with a group of young skaters. The Kremlin offered condolences to the families of Russians killed.
Multiple deaths have been reported after a passenger jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided mid-air and crashed into the Potomac River Wednesday night near Reagan Washington National Airport. Police said several agencies were involved in a search and rescue operation in the river. The airport said late on Wednesday that all takeoffs and landings had been halted as emergency personnel responded. The Federal Aviation Authority said PSA Airlines was operating a regional flight for American Airlines, which had departed from Wichita, Kansas. American Airlines said 60 passengers and 4 crew were on the plane. A U.S. official said 3 soldiers were aboard the helicopter. There were no confirmed reports of survivors, and CBS News said at least 18 bodies had been pulled from the water. Officials said they were still in rescue mode. Reuters White House reporter Trevor Honeycutt was at the airport.
As I'm here, I'm seeing relatives trickle in little by little through the night with no answers about what has happened to their relatives. They are just looking for information, and for the most part, they are not finding it here at the area where they are all being staged with other friends and family members who are looking for their loved ones.
In a post on social media, U.S. President Donald Trump asked why the crash wasn't averted. He called it a, quote, bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented. New Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the Pentagon was launching an immediate inquiry into the circumstances of the crash.
We're now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter. The District Office of the Medical Examiner has lead on reuniting these bodies and these people with their loved ones, and we will continue to work to find all the bodies and collect them and reunite them with their loved ones. We should also acknowledge that the Virginia Medical Examiner and the Army Medical Examiner are involved in this operation and a very important part of getting the people identified.
First and most importantly, I'd like to express our deep sorrow about these events. This is a difficult day for all of us at American Airlines, and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, partners, first responders, along with their families and loved ones. We're cooperating fully with the National Transportation Safety Board in its investigation and will continue to provide all the information we can. Our cooperation is without pause, and we want to learn everything we can about today's events. We understand and appreciate that people are eager for information. Please know that we'll continue to share accurate and timely information as soon as we can. But anything we must report must be accurate. We owe that to everyone involved.
All we can confirm tonight is the number of people on each aircraft, 64 people on the American Airlines plane and 3 people on the military helicopter. When we can't provide any more information about recovery efforts. The focus now is rescuing people, and that's what all of our personnel are focused on.
It's an active operation that's going to last many hours as we continue to work through recovery efforts and rescue operations. This will be ongoing for quite a while. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and our communities, and we appreciate all DC's support to our agency and our federal partners.
Multiple deaths have been reported after a passenger jet and U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided mid-air and crashed into the Potomac River Wednesday night near Reagan Washington National Airport. Police said several agencies were involved in a search and rescue operation in the river. The airport said late on Wednesday that all takeoffs and landings had been halted as emergency personnel responded. The Federal Aviation Authority said PSA Airlines was operating a regional flight for American Airlines, which had departed from Wichita, Kansas. American Airlines said 60 passengers and 4 crew were on the plane. A U.S. official said 3 soldiers were aboard the helicopter. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas said on social media that, quote, "We know there are fatalities," though he did not say how many. NBC reported that 4 people had been recovered from the river, while the Washington Post said multiple bodies had been pulled from the water. The National Transportation Safety Board said it was gathering more information on the incident.
Questions are swirling after the deadly midair collision of an American Airlines passenger jet and a U.S. Army helicopter near a Washington, D.C. airport. Here's what we know about what happened. The collision occurred Wednesday night as the passenger jet was approaching Reagan Washington National Airport. Here's audio of air traffic control clearing the aircraft to land.
Yeah, we can do 3-3 for Blue 6342.
Radio communications showed the helicopter crew knew the plane was in the vicinity.
Did you see that? X-472.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said both the helicopter and the airplane had been flying standard flight patterns, and there had been no breakdown in communication.
Everything was standard in the lead up to the crash.
The Army helicopter involved a fairly experienced crew of 3 soldiers who were operating with night vision goggles on a training flight, according to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission.
But he said the helicopter crew may have made a deadly mistake.
A mistake was made. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DoD and Army level.
Military helicopters are a common sight around the U.S. Capital Region that is home to numerous military bases. There have been several near-miss incidents at Reagan National Airport that have sparked alarm, including 2 last year. The close calls coincide with a shortage of air traffic controllers that has delayed flights and raised safety concerns across the United States. The FAA in October opened an audit into runway incursion risks at the 45 busiest U.S. airports.